Who doesn't love Renee Fleming? I mean, seriously, she has the voice of an angel and the heart of an angel, too. Not to mention her mind. It's really not of an angel, but maybe of a scientist. For nearly a decade, Renee has not only been wowing people on the stage, performing all over the world, but she has focused her incredible energy on really investigating how music impacts our health. Everything from child development to fighting off depression and social isolation and everything in between. She's got a new book out, which is a series of essays written by some of the greatest minds in science and art called Music and Mind, Harnessing the Arts for Health and Wellness. Hi, Renee.
How are you? Great
I
to see
am
you,
great.
Katie.
Nice to see you, Renee. I'm such a fan, and I feel like we've become friends in recent years, which has been a real highlight for me. And before I talk about your incredible book and your extraordinary work, by the way, I want listeners to know a little more about your background. We recently had a cup of coffee, and I was embarrassed to say I didn't know as much about your childhood as I should have. And your parents, Renee, were both music teachers. Is that where you got your gift?
Well, I would say that's where I had no choice because, we just lived and breathed music starting from a very early age. In fact, I was told that I sang before I spoke. I was a very late speaker. And that's probably true, and we were kind of taking road trips and singing the road signs in harmony. And I thought everyone did that. I thought that was just normal, completely normal. So, and then I just kept up with it. And I think that some of the early learning is really helpful because music is a language, and so it becomes one of the languages that you speak as a child.
Now, did
Um,
your parents have extraordinary voices like you? And what about your siblings? And if not, were they pissed that you did and they didn't?
Now everybody, there were so many great voices out there. It's just, but finding your way to a high level career in singing is another whole thing. They say the voice is 10%. And my parents were wonderful teachers and musicians. And my father's still alive actually, and he's
What
still.
did your dad play and what did your mom play?
Well, they were both singers. So,
Oh, both singers.
yeah, they were both singers and they both play keyboard to some extent. My sister teaches very high level pedagogy for non-classical singers at Temple University. So she's producing the next generation of Broadway stars. And my brother sings at a rock band, but he teaches technology in middle school in New Rochelle. So everybody's an educator. That's
Yeah, and and
common.
and
My little brother sings in the Houston Grand Opera Chorus, so he is a professional singer.
wow. So you all obviously were bitten by the bug. And if you aren't directly involved with music, you're music adjacent.
Yes, definitely.
Well, I know that um, I think it might surprise a lot of people, Renee, that you don't consider yourself a natural performer. And you experienced some intense stage fright when you were a teenager and a little bit later in your life when I think you were just dealing with a lot of pressure and stress. So that I understand led you to be interested in the mind body connection. Can you talk about how that happened and why?
Absolutely. So, yeah, the pressure for performance in our field is really high. We are literally reviewed in the newspaper the day after we perform almost every time. And certainly for most of my career that was and the standards and by which we are judged were very high. So it's not easy to be us. And add to that it's a tightrope, that the fact that we're singing virtuosic music alone on stage without a microphone. So nobody's adding to the sound or making it more beautiful or adding auto tune. We're very
Yeah.
naked on stage, and so that produced not only stage fright, but I had somatic pain, which is a kind of a psychosomatic pain, which nearly derailed my career a couple of times. So
Well,
I
when did
found
it surface? When did those moment surface because it's interesting if you think about what was going on in your life, right, Renee? First as a teenager, and later, I know when you had your two children and your marriage was falling apart.
Absolutely. And, first of all, the stage fright started in middle school. It started at a very young age because I was incredibly shy. I was a bookworm. So I did not have an ounce of natural performer in me. And I had to learn it. I learned it literally by observing my friends for whom it was easy in, Juilliard and at Eastman and when I studied abroad. So I picked those skills up kind of. But yeah, when you have life stressors, then everything falls apart. And in my case, I think it was the stage fright served as a kind of a hedge against the pressure, but also against not making life changes that I needed to make. And, I feel lucky that I got the right support and I was able to get through it without stopping because we know very famous people who have stopped performing and sometimes they don't go back for 20 years. It's hard to go back.
You say there were a lot of factors, Renee, involved in your, I guess, maybe panic attack or discomfort on stage. And you say one was a deep-seated discomfort with success. Now, I've never heard of that, but when I thought about it, you're right. You write, we can all point to celebrities or politicians who have sabotaged their careers with drug and alcohol abuse or other poor choices. Part of the problem is that you're being taken far from your roots and comfort zone, maybe to a level of success that's far beyond your friends and family, and that's uncomfortable.
Right, exactly. It's really kind of intuitive when one thinks about it, that yeah, what causes people to burn up their lives when they're really achieving greatness? And in many cases, it is definitely that you've come too far from your comfort zone as a human being, from your comfort zone as, how you grew up, etc. Or you weren't prepared to succeed and to excel somehow. You were made to believe on some, it's always a subconscious level, it's never conscious,
Right.
that something bad would happen if you did really well.
How did you fix it? How did you deal with it? Those times
um,
where you have this crippling anxiety and fear.
well, there are two ways. One is to understand the root, so that's therapy, and the other is behavioral therapy. So re kind of tuning your thinking about performing. I had to stop seeing the audience as judgmental. I imagine everyone had a scorecard and they were not well intentioned. And so
Right.
I once I turned it around and it was a book by Beverly Sills on public speaking, I was able to see myself as a conduit for something beautiful that I was sharing, giving to the audience. So I reversed the direction of the experience of performing and it helped immensely.
I think all of us at one time or another have felt dramatically moved by a piece of music or art. It's so interesting when something hits you, it's almost all of your senses are swept away. I've had that experience. I'm sure probably hearing you sing, Renee, but many, many times. So talk about this feeling for people listening and are trying to understand the real neurological connection that's going on between music and your entire being.
Well, it's very much embedded in our DNA. It's been with us since before we spoke. I mean, really the beginning of humans. And it's incredibly powerful. From my perspective on stage, it's a flow state. I'm in the zone when I'm performing. It induces feelings of awe, and awe has now, by science, been proven to be something incredibly beneficial. But what's wonderful about it, in terms of that the fact that it's so much a part of our lives, any aesthetic experience, whether it's being in nature or seeing visual art or just looking at design and architecture, has a huge effect on our biology, really down to the cellular level. It's the elephant in the room, as my friend Susan McSalmon says. It is something that we take for granted, and we don't really understand how powerful it is. And now the fact that science is looking at it, is researching it, is looking at the brain when we're having these experiences, is teaching us a lot.
Yeah, I want to talk about the science in a moment, but is a lot of this about memory? So it's interesting. My friend Peter Sincotti, I don't know if you know Peter. He's a great jazz pianist and vocalist. And I told him that I had a song that I thought he should perform and
Okay.
record. And yeah, I'm going to play it for you because I just love this song. I love the words. I love everything about it.
To the lonely summer lovers, when the leaves begin to fall, here's to the losers, bless them all. Hey, Tom, Dick, and Harry, coming out of the rain, those torches you carry, they must be drowned in champagne. The last toast of the evening is to those who still believe all the losers will be winners.
Renee, I used to listen to that song in my basement. My dad had an album, Frank Sinatra. It was the Capitol Records years. And
Wow.
I absolutely love that song. So when Peter sent that to me, I just had a rush of memories. First of all, I love the words, I love the tune, I love everything about this song. And it's kind of an obscure, I was going to look up who wrote it, but Frank Sinatra recorded it with the Nelson Riddle Orchestra. And it made me wonder how much of our attraction and being swept away and for us to be in a certain flow has to
Mhm.
do with memory and experiences.
Well, memory is incredibly powerful and very much connected to music. So that's why, for instance, a couple of things. One is that if you hear a song, you're taken back to your wedding or your high school graduation or whatever formative experiences you've had, and it's immediate. And the nervous system and also the brain, it's so much about the brain, but basically, and you can switch. You can go back, you could hear the next song and it will take you to a different memory. So it's incredibly powerful, but what we're discovering for Alzheimer's patients, which is something everyone is afraid of now. I'm talking all over the country, and that's the leading, I would say, subject around which people have anxiety. But memories are very much connected to our experience. So that's one of them. That's one of, I would say, the most powerful courses of research right now. Pain is another. You know,
Yeah, I'm sure. And can you explain in lay person's terms how the music affects the brain, or is that too wonky?
No, it's interesting because Dan Levitin, who does neuromapping really in the chapter that he writes for my book, talks exactly about where this all lives in the brain and how it works and how it's tied together. But the reason the NIH is studying music is because music is in every known part of the mapped brain as to date. And that's incredibly powerful. There are almost no other activities that are that widespread in the brain. And part of it is the complexity of engaging with music. It's hearing, it's rhythm, so it's, movement also, it's memory, it's language, because we're often thinking about words to go with these things. That's just a very complex activity. And if you're making music, it's triply so.
And I know that when they mapped your brain singing, Renee, it showed areas of your brain lighting up that don't
Yeah.
light up when you're speaking, right?
Correct, correct. And what surprised the scientists in my fMRI study, I was in that machine for 2 hours. My goodness.
And you were singing away?
Yeah, singing away, like, many repetitions. But what surprised them was that imagining singing was more powerful than the other two,
Really?
than speaking or singing.
Wow, that's
Yeah. And
crazy.
it,
So
it,
just thinking of songs
yeah.
and does the same go for people who can't sing or who prefer listening over singing?
Maybe not. Maybe singing for them would be more kind of almost traumatic to have to sing in an MRI machine. So that might have been more active. They actually did sort of surmise that because I'm a singer, it's a bit second nature to me.
Right,
So,
right.
but
But
while imagining, I had to tune out the noise of the fMRI, of the MRI. I had to focus, et cetera. So it was a little different.
that's interesting. So, but the same benefits of singing, again, for people who are not blessed with your amazing voice. I mean, it doesn't keep me from from singing just because I can't sing like you, Renee. But what about people who are just listening to music? Can you talk about what that does to the brain?
Well, first of all, you're a pianist, so you are a musician, which is so fabulous that you had that training. That'll
Well, it's more, you know, what's really weird, Renee, is I play by ear. Now, and I play mostly like Irving Berlin in the key of C because it's hard for me to play complicated like Billy Joel songs with a lot of flats or sharps. But while I took piano for 10 years, when I sit down, I just sound out music that I like and just play it. And that's I don't know. I'm the only one in my family who can do that. And I was hoping my daughters would be able to play by ear, but they can't either. Where does that come from?
I'm first of all, I'm really jealous. I had the chance to take jazz harmony from a jazz musician in graduate school, and I in exchange for voice lessons, and I wish I had done it because to be able to play by ear, first of all, that's the most relaxing thing you can do
I
because
know.
it's improvisation and you have to shut off the part of your frontal lobe which judges you. You have to that has to turn off for you to be able to do that, which has got to be great for your health. And so listening to music, what's fascinating about it is it's been shown to be incredibly beneficial for anxiety, for depression, for pain. So it's really beneficial to listen to music. And especially we do it anyway. We use playlists for exercise or cooking or, walking. We
But
do
what
it.
is it? What is it, Renee, that is there a particular place in your brain it impacts? Like for pain, does it does it light up a part of your brain and then it sort of overcomes the part of your brain that is having to deal with pain? Like, how does it work?
So it can be a distraction. It's releasing chemicals into your brain, endorphins, and these are feel-good chemicals. So it's incredibly helpful for our health to do this, especially today. Today's stressors, this year is going to be rough. We know that. So I've actually become a a child for neuro arts, and I'm doing artistic things every day that I enjoy and getting away from
The
things that
news?
are very upsetting opinion news. I'm really just not doing it this year.
Yeah.
So it's helping me, but I can't tell you how much happier I am. So, and listening to music is one of those things. So it's really about the release of chemicals in your brain that makes this work. And then they also talk about the fact that one of the things, I don't know if you ever, if you hurt yourself, if you cut yourself, and then you bump your knee, the
Yeah.
the initial pain goes away because you're now distracted by the new pain. So,
Right.
uh,
Well, whenever I'm getting a shot or like Botox, yeah, once in a while, I will pinch my hand really, really hard. So I'm focused on the pain in my hand instead of the pain in my forehead. True
exactly.
confessions here on Next Question with Katie Couric.
Exactly. And also, frankly, listening to music can also work the same way. It is a distraction, but it more than that, it does something really positive for you.
Let's talk about your book because it really stems from a conversation with Francis Collins, who was head of the NIH in 2015. He's
Right.
also an amateur musician. So tell us about that meeting and how it led to your commitment to this work. Because Renee, I mean, you've really gone there. You have dug deep into this topic. Tell us about that initial meeting.
So we were at this really interesting dinner party because it was the day after the marriage equality decision by the Supreme Court. And three Supreme Court members were at this dinner. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Antonin Scalia, and Kennedy were all there.
Wow.
And
Wow.
they weren't really, it was tense. It was tense. And I was seated between RBG and Scalia because they're
Oh
both
God. Although they're very good friends, or they were very good friends.
this, but this was tough. That his rebuttal was really scathing, etc. So Francis brought his guitar as he always does. I had never met him before, so I just took the opportunity that night to say, why are scientists studying music? Because I had seen the neuroscience just in newspapers in recent years at that time. And we started I started singing with him, and we were playing, and by the end of the night everybody was happy, really much happier. And so he said, we have a new brain institute. We want to understand, it's an initiative we want to understand this incredibly complex organ, the most complex um, thing in the universe, really. And so music is one of the ways that we can do that. So now they've funded, since we started our project, which is Sound Health, with the NEA, the Kennedy Center. I'm an advisor there.
I
And
know, and you did a
I,
19-part series. I was watching some of them last night. I mean, that was a huge commitment. I think you did it during the pandemic, but you
webinar,
did,
thank you.
yeah, you did a whole series of webinars really on every aspect of music and the brain, which I
Right.
guess in some ways laid the framework for the book, right?
Well, it certainly did. I mean, and Vivek Murthy is now, our Surgeon General, has really become a champion for this work as well. And the NIH has spent $30 million funding music research. I mean, nobody would have predicted that when I met him.
That's incredible. And you mentioned patients with Alzheimer's, and you and I have talked about this as well. There was a documentary a few years back. I wonder if it's available. I interviewed the people behind it, and then there was like some breaking news story. So it never aired, and they were crestfallen. So
Oh,
I know. And it's called Alive Inside, and it was about people giving elderly folks in nursing homes, I guess at the time, maybe iPods
iPods.
and earphones or whatever, and how their personas completely changed when
Mhm.
they heard music that they knew and recognized and loved.
Right. That's the memory piece. Dan Cohen's film. It's beautiful. It's on YouTube.
Is it? Okay,
Yeah.
I highly recommend Alive Inside,
Yeah.
everybody, because it's pretty extraordinary. And I learned so much from your book. And I thought we could just talk about a few of the points quickly. You write that hearing is I knew this, by the way, when my dad was in hospice and he was dying, and I was very, very close to my dad. He was just
Oh,
an amazing person. I brought a little speaker to the hospital room and my phone, and I played all his favorite songs. When I used to play the piano, he'd yell down to the basement, Katie, play as time goes by, or I'll be seeing you. And so I played all of these wonderful songs that I knew he loved because I had always heard that hearing was the last to go. But
yes.
tell me about why we haven't done more research on that.
Well, it's been hard to do the research on anything artistic. So it's the brain imaging, and it's the fact that technology has really expanded that's allowing us now to see all of this. So it's new. It's basically relatively new because but technology makes it possible. So so what's interesting about that is my husband's aunt at the end of her life, didn't know anyone around her, didn't speak. I was there, I saw this. But if you said, I'm looking, she would finish the whole song.
Over a four-leaf clover.
Exactly. She would finish the song with words absolutely perfect. And there are 5 or 6 songs that she would do. And I just sort of thought, this is actually joyful. And, these were pieces from her childhood, but she didn't open her eyes and she didn't know anyone. So it is the last memory to go, music memory. And
And
that's
I,
why researchers are using it to try and extend that moment of aliveness that you see in the film. I mean, look at the Henry segments, they're really powerful.
yeah, and that's also something important for people to know that even talking to someone who may not be, you may not think is there is really important at the end of someone's life. You
Yes.
also talk about, and you meant, sorry, Renee. You mentioned that you sang before you spoke, but that's really true of our species, that a lot of humans sang before they spoke. Can you explain that to me?
Well, we don't, we can't
Yeah,
really
yeah.
know what happened then. Researchers are looking at animals now and birds and dogs and horses even to kind of try and piece together what our evolution was artistically. But it makes kind of a lot of sense that in order to survive, humans, could make vocal sounds that would be like the animals they were hunting. So birds or whatever creatures they were, and then eventually speech didn't develop until much, much later. Because
Oh,
that,
how interesting.
yeah. So, it's really fascinating when you think about that. In fact, there's a language I just learned. I just came back from India, and there's a language there that they couldn't really decipher. It's done in chanting by monks, and they
Mm,
finally realized. They said we believe that these songs predate speech, so
wow.
people are still singing them. It's so interesting.
That is interesting. You also point out that women suffering from postpartum depression can benefit from singing in a choir. Help
Yeah.
me understand that, Renee.
So, it surprised me, honestly. This is relatively new research, but the World Health Organization is beginning to have tremendous success by taking some of these findings to countries where they are in a better position than we are to kind of embed them in healthcare right away. So, but it works. Singing in a choir somehow really improves the level of depression, the level of difficulty that women with postpartum depression are having. And singing in a choir has a lot of benefits. They just did a study that compared singing in a choir with singing alone, and singing in a choir had better health outcomes.
Well,
Um,
you can understand why, right? I mean, you have a sense
Social.
of community, you
Yeah.
have kind of working literally in harmony with
Yes.
others and feeling something greater than yourself. I mean, it makes total sense, right?
Totally, and it strengthens immunity too, they found. But our brain waves align when we're in a shared artistic experience. And that's meaningful, that's powerful, and that's definitely evolution.
And that's also a huge argument to keep performing arts programs in schools across the country, right? Especially at a
Oh,
time when young people are experiencing unprecedented anxiety and depression and stress. I think maybe educators will understand how important the arts are to your overall education, yeah,
no
educational
question.
experience, right?
Absolutely. The art should stay in schools for a couple of reasons. One is that it's good for you. It helps kids with identity, with figuring out who they are. They can be more creative as a result. But one of the main purposes is truancy is becoming a tremendous problem, especially in urban centers around the country. And an artistic pursuit can keep kids in school. So that's major. One of the things I would really like to see happen is for creative arts therapists to be embedded in schools to help kids with pro-social behaviors and the kinds of things we're talking about, but also to kind of give morale to everybody. And they can work alongside arts educators too.
You talk about your hope for reimagining performing arts venues in order to serve the public in a very different way too, outside of schools. What is your vision for that, Renee?
Well, there was a study done by Opera America that interested me because it said that what people want is to be together with their friends and families. That's why they go to performances. They want to be seated in the round. They want to be able to order drinks. And so let's make it social, but let's make it also a place where we exchange ideas together. So in a way, I could envision performing arts centers becoming community centers.
That would be wonderful. And I think we need it more than ever. I think everyone's looking for experiences, right? And sort of these experiential opportunities, I think certainly after the pandemic, when you're all together with people sharing something. And honestly, I think part of the problem with polarization in this country, Renee, is that we all are in our little silos. And this whole feeling of even the nation or a big section of the population seeing something at once at the same time and enjoying it has become, you know, few and far between. I think that's why sports are so popular.
Absolutely. I mean, sports definitely does that, and performing arts can do it as well. But this loneliness and isolation are at an all-time high, and it's a worldwide problem. Dr. Tedros of the World Health Organization told me he's incredibly concerned because depression is up 30% in the world. And part of it is this isolation. So the people in the US are not going to performances as much as they did before the pandemic for a number of reasons.
And they're not going to church and places like that where you have that sense of community either, and music, by the way.
Well, and I would tell them this is not good for your health. You folks have to get out and be with other people. So science tells us now that it's really important. We are social creatures.
It's interesting. I tried to pitch a documentary in 2018 prior to the pandemic, and I've interviewed Vivek Murthy many times, and nobody was interested. But now maybe with these huge numbers, people might reconsider. They thought it was too much of a downer. I'm like, okay, whatever. Anyway, let's go back to your book, Renee, because I just want to finish up by asking you how you were able to assemble such an incredible group of artists and scientists. It includes essays written by everyone from Yo-Yo Ma to architect Liz Diller to scientists from MIT and Johns Hopkins. How in the world, Renee, by the way, with your day job, how did you assemble all these experts and say, can you contribute to this book?
Well, I was trying to show the breadth of the field as it currently exists and talk about the future, the pillars, also childhood development is a major pillar. And I just asked repeatedly. It took a long time to pull this together. And it's a good reference also for people who kind of just want to maybe they want to just go to one specific section, but there are chapters that make people cry. They're very surprised. There were two young men who saw a need in their communities and they created initiatives that are booming now, one in Philadelphia and one in New York City. There's Roseanne Cash's chapter, kills me. I mean, what she went through with a wrongly diagnosed brain disorder called Chiari 1, and she in her recovery from that as a musician, it's harrowing. And you have, Esperanza Spalding and Rhiannon Giddens and really interesting artists, writers, Richard Powers and Ann Patchett. So I wanted it to really be expansive.
Well, it's incredible what you've put together, Renee. And I'm just so, I mean, I'm not in a position to be proud of you, but I'm so impressed by your commitment to something because, obviously you want to contribute more to the world than just your beautiful singing voice and your artistic prowess. And, it's time consuming. How were you able to do it and to really spend so much time? You're clearly intellectually curious. So,
Yes, yes. Well, I have wonderful Jason and Paul in my office, and I couldn't have done it without Jason because he was the nuts and bolts gathering everything. What I didn't know about writing this book, because I had already written a book called The Inner Voice, was that in anthology, all the work falls to us, to me. So I really had to have help, no question. But we did get it done, and I think it's beautiful. I would also point to my friend's book, Your Brain on Art, that was a bestseller last year for people who like a broader kind of artistic experience. The neuroscience
mhm.
book is fascinating. And I'm working closely with them. Anyway, we're about to announce scholars. So I'm funding now, put your money where your mouth is, right? I'm
Yeah,
funding grants for young scientists who partner with an artist.
that
And
is awesome.
they're amazing. So that's coming out next week.
Well, wow, that's exciting. Well, you've given so much to the world. It was so wonderful to see you as a Kennedy Center honoree, so well
Oh,
deserved. And I know
incredible.
that that was such a thrill. I wasn't there, but I got to watch it, and what an incredible experience. And I can't think of anyone more deserving. The book that you've got out now is called Music and Mind: Harnessing the Arts for Health and Wellness. Renee, so great to see you. Thank you so much for talking to me about all your important work because I think it's going to solve a lot of problems if people actually implement some of the ideas that are put forth in this book.
Thank you, Katie. I really appreciate your time and attention to this. Thank you. I believe you, and I agree.